personally think that money is such a great pillar of wealth, because if you look at the trajectory of properties, I know property prices are quite high now, but properties on average double every 10 years. That hasn't changed for the longest time. And and in my view, it's going to continue. So I do think there is money in property. I think we definitely need to diversify and look at stocks and shares and other things like that. But property, I definitely think bricks and mortar, they hold their weight and their value.
Hi, this is Max back with Black Income Creators podcast. I'm here with Juliana Owusu, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself.
Of course. As she said, my name is Juliana. My brand name is Property by Jules, and I'm a property developer and a property strategist. So that means I basically help people at any stage in their property journey. If they're a first-time buyer, wants to get into the property space and they want recommendations for brokers or solicitors, whether you are already in the property space and you want to sell your portfolio, I help people to understand what they need to do with their money. And also I do deal sourcing, I do consultationships, I do mentorships. So I do a bit of everything within the property field just to help and inspire people to make sure that they know they can also get onto the ladder. And apart from that, I'm also a mum of 3 and a wife. I've been married for 10 years this September, I think it is now. I'm an auntie, yeah, a lot of stuff.
And it's interesting, actually, I think, being in property at the moment. So a lot of us have struggled with kind of like interest rates going up sort of threefold. I think my interest rate was 1.25, or so I can't remember what it was.
You had a 1.25?
Yeah. I was quite lucky, an interest only as well. And then it just went up to like 4.5 or 4.75. I can't remember.
Literally quadrupled.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of like where, I think, all that's in the media can be quite scary for somebody who's thinking
100%.
about entering. So like, what are you finding in terms of like people who are coming to you now compared to maybe 3-4 years ago?
You know what? People who come to me now, they're definitely a lot more cautious because of what's on the news. But I always say, irrespective of what's on the news, you have to live within your means. If like you can stress test and you can afford to get onto the ladder, I always say sooner than later. Because if you get onto the property ladder now, although interest rates may be high, as long as you can afford it, in time that property will go up in value. So you will still reap the benefit, even if you feel you've got it at a wrong time. There's never a wrong time to get into property, in my opinion.
And in terms of people trying to get into property, so let's assume you own your own home, but you kind of think property is a business or property is an investment. What's typically the sort of direction people can afford? What are the more affordable options?
Okay, so I would always ask anyone who approaches me that in terms of what is your risk tolerance? And the reason I say that is because if you have the funds to do a vanilla buy-to-let, so a standard buy-to-let, buy a property which you would need 25% of that property value. So if it's 200k, you need 50k for just a deposit. You're obviously going to have a higher stamp duty to pay, the normal fees, the valuation, and all the rest of it like that. If you can afford that, then get a vanilla buy-to-let, get a tenant in there, get them paying the rent, and you'll get paid twice on the property with the actual rent you get per month. And hopefully when the property goes up in value. If you're more on the riskier side and you have a lot more cash, there's things like BRRR, buy, refurb, rent and refinance, where you can basically buy a property that is really undervalued, do it up, add tons of value, remortgage it now to actually get a mortgage on it, and then you can normally pull out a lot of money. And that's a strategy that I've done where I've basically recycled cash over and over again. So it depends on your risk tolerance if you want to scale up your property portfolio.
And you're 11 at the moment, are you still?
11 at the moment, 13 by the hopefully end of next month.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're in the process. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because what you're basically saying is that, that risk appetite will determine your property strategy, basically. And some people, I guess the sort of like BRR is a little bit unknown. Like we all know how to do buy to let, but I guess we don't know necessarily how to do that. Is it the same type of mortgage? Is it a buy to let mortgage that you're buying at the time that you're purchasing at the time, or is it a different type of mortgage?
That's a great question. So with BRRR, The way to make it actually work is if you have the money to buy a property cash. That's why it strips out a lot of people. So when I say risk appetite, you can be more risky with the cash you've got. So obviously it's affordability and risk. If you have a lot more cash, you can buy a property for less than it should be, because most sellers are motivated by a cash buyer because the process happens quicker. They cut out all the lending, they cut out all of the hoops you've got to jump through. And if you can buy it cash, when you refinance it, that's when you can pull a lot of money out.
Right. Okay. Because you don't have a mortgage on
Yeah,
it, so you're not looking at that 25%
exactly.
deposit.
Not at
Okay.
all.
Would it be that most people who are doing this sort of BRR are doing it through auction where they can sort of like pick up a bargain, or
You know what? It's a lot of different avenues. You can either go on auction because they tend to be cheaper, but you've got to be careful because sometimes because there's so many people on auction, you can actually end up overpaying because there's so many bidders and you get emotionally attached where you just want to be the one to win and you overpay on something that should be a lot less. And there's another thing that I always say to all my mentees and people who want to get a property. It doesn't hurt to be nice, because when you call up estate agents and you're asking them and telling them what your criteria is or something that you're looking for, if you build up a relationship over time, this is what how me and my husband have got a lot of properties. They've been able to actually contact us before it goes online. So before it goes on Zoopla, Rightmove, all of those good sites, they'll give us the option to get it. And then we've got a lot of properties that way where because we're able to negotiate because we're cash buyers or because they know that we're good buyers and we're not time wasters, we're able to get a lot of properties that way. So sometimes you can do auction, sometimes you can get a property that's not gone on to the market yet. And also, even walking the street, it's very few and far between, but walking the street and seeing properties that have been there for such a long time that you know it's unoccupied, there's no one living there, you can actually find out in different ways who the owner is and find a way to contact them, find a way to let them know, I've seen the property, it's been unoccupied, I'm interested in buying, is it an option? And then another way to get a property.
and I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because some people, they're getting into property to be a landlord, and that's fine because
Yeah.
that's, so they get sort of the passive income, etc. But some
Mm-hmm.
people aren't necessarily looking to become a landlord. Do you know what I mean? Because it has its pros and cons of being a landlord. They do just want to
So,
do kind of like a different type of model. So I think something like
yeah,
the BRR is a little bit more attractive if you can sort of, if you
especially
do
if you
have
can
that.
afford it.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
have that appetite for risk, etc., and you're willing to sort of like do it, it does sound like because being a landlord isn't easy. It's not
I've been
easy.
there, being called at midnight to come and fix a leaking ceiling, the boilers burst, children are cold. You have to do it. You can't turn off your phone and say no. You're literally having to look after someone else's home.
Yeah, and I know a lot of landlords now. So my friends had like I think 15 properties at the most, and they're downsizing their portfolios because they're
Mm,
actually now with the interest rates going up and all sorts of other things, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. That it's not enough return.
yeah.
Plus, you don't get the tax breaks that you used to get on your buy to let. So
Mm.
like it's just not worth it. So let's go back a little bit and start sort of like
Hello?
where did your property journey start?
Okay. So my property journey started in 2014. Um, I grew up in not a privileged state. My parents never owned any properties. I grew up in Brixton, South London, a product of council homes, free school meals, all of that good stuff. And I had never seen ownership growing up. So I wanted to ensure that that wasn't going to be part of my future. So when I left uni, I started working, but property was still in the back of my mind. But literally, I knew there was no way I was going to be able to buy a property in the time slot I wanted to while I'm paying someone else's rent. So what I'd done is I went back to live with my dad and his new family because he had remarried. And I stayed there for 10 months, saved up every single piece of money I had, didn't go on holidays, didn't do anything fun, but saved up all that money to go and buy a property. And after 10 months, I got there and I bought a two-bed flat in Dagenham.
Oh gosh.
Into it. Yeah. You know what? For me, it wasn't, well, yeah, it was a little bit far, but it was within London. It's within the M25, right? So that's a blessing. So I bought that property in 2014, and that's when my property journey started. But I didn't go into this with the mindset of I want to be a property entrepreneur. I just wanted to have a house that was mine, that no one can take off me, that no one can evict me from, that I can say it is mine and that's it. And I can grow a family in. And then after we bought the property, got married the year after. They got pregnant with twins straight after marriage. And when I got pregnant, it was the conversation of, although we can all fit and it's absolutely comfortable in this property, we wanted something that we can grow a family in that's a bit bigger, that we can flex a bit more, that we didn't have to move once the kid got to the age where they can start walking or the rest of it. And it wasn't one kid, it was two. So our time and space was more restricted. So before the twins were born, we decided to move, and we moved and bought a place in Kent. But in the process of doing that, we had to obviously sell our Dagenham flat. So we were in the property only for about 18 months. But in that time, when we wanted to sell it, it went up £60,000. And I was like, what? In 18 months, 60K? Is that how property works? I had no idea that that's what people do, or that's what property values go up by. I went into it absolutely blind, thinking when they come to value it, it's just going to be maybe 1K more than it was when I bought it. I only bought it 18 months ago. You're telling me 60K up. So when we got that, we sold that property, we then lived in our family home in Kent, a four-bed house in Kent, and we bought two more properties with that profit, one in Manchester and one in Greenhive, because I wanted to use that money wisely and multiply what I've literally just done. And that's literally how it started, just by chance, because the property value went up of somewhere that I got.
It's interesting because obviously a lot of people tend to stick to areas that they know. So if they're in London, and even South Londoners or East Londoners, they don't typically go outside. That's why I'm surprised you went Dagenham, because Dagenham is kind of like quite far
could afford.
No, true, but again, people
Literally.
don't think like that, do they? So a lot of times they're sort of like looking within their sort of like the areas that they're comfortable with, the areas that they know. So what made you then say Greenhive and Manchester? Because they're completely random.
Yeah, definitely random. But when I went to uni, obviously you have friends that kind of disperse. But people go to Manchester, Cambridge, they go to other different unis. So I had visited cities I had never gone to before, and understood that this is a lot cheaper than what I'm paying. This looks a lot bigger than what I've got, but you're paying less than me, or prices are less than me, or what your rent is way less than mine. So that really was in the back of my mind. So when we got the profit from the flats being sold in Dagenham, it was literally look for where we can afford. And that's what came up. That was commutable enough. When I say commutable, at least 2.5 hour drive. So that's why we went to those two areas. It was literally what we could afford with the cash that we had to do two buy-to-lets.
Talk to me a little bit about obviously buying as a single person, and now obviously doing things as a couple, what the difference is in terms of tax. So I don't know, are there differences or is it all the same?
Because there wasn't no difference, because when I bought the Dagenham property myself, I got it as a 5% mortgage. So I got the lowest mortgage I can get, because that's what I could afford. Then when we got our family home in Kent, we got it as a couple. But technically, because I had sold that property, I was still considered as a first-time buyer with my now husband. So there wasn't any difference, to be honest, at that point. But when you now get multiple properties, that's when the taxes now change, and you got to pay a lot more stamp duty. And just to fast forward a little bit from what I was saying before, the two properties that we bought, the Manchester one and the Greenhive properties, we had to actually end up selling them, because back in the day, the tax laws changed, where it was if you owned second properties and you want to buy other properties in your personal name, they're going to absolutely charge you arm and a leg for stamp duty. So we had to sell them and start our portfolio from scratch, buying all our other properties in our limited company name.
I was just saying about sort of like, obviously with the tax laws, you never know if they're going to change, and sometimes, etc. But it's better for people to buy, if they're doing sort of buy to let, or they're doing things around property, would you suggest going through a limited company where possible?
You know what? That's a really question. I get asked that quite a bit. It depends on how big your portfolio you want it to be. If you're going to get one or two extra properties, I don't know if it's worth getting limited company, because you're going to have to obviously pay an accountant to do your returns for you each year. You actually do pay a higher interest rate when you buy a limited company. You have to get something called a personal guarantee, and do and speak to a separate solicitor to do your personal guarantees that you have to pay for if you buy a limited company. So if you're going to have one or two, the extra cost may not be worth it. But if you're looking to scale and get a lot more, that's when the tax benefits make sense.
is there still money in property? I guess is the question that a lot of people might ask, because it's kind of like, it looks like those that are already in property are downsizing. Is there still scope for someone to start from scratch now?
I honestly do think there is. I've got a lot of mentees that are masterminds get into property that are my coaching, I help and I consult. And I personally think that money is such a great pillar of wealth because if you look at the trajectory of properties, I know property prices are quite high now, but properties on average double every 10 years. That hasn't changed for the longest time. And in my view, it's going to continue. So I do think there is money in property. I think we definitely need to diversify and look at stocks and shares and other things like that. But property, I definitely think bricks and mortar, they hold their weight and their value.
And you talked about, at the beginning of your journey, sort of going and living with your dad and his family for 10 months and sort of not doing anything else. What other sacrifices did you kind of have to make during that period of time? Or did you like take on side hustles, take a second job or anything like that?
So I'm someone who I've always kind of been a bit money hungry, if I'm being honest. Once I'm in a job and I know there's scope for promotion, I'm always kind of letting them know, oh, by the way, I'm happy to get promoted. I'm happy to do more. I make sure I work hard so they know if there's something on the card, I'm going to be first in line to get it. And I was also happy to change jobs. I know before we actually came on camera and we were talking about procurement. So I've worked in marketing, procurement, government, creative industry. I'm happy to change industry if they will pay me enough. So in terms of sacrifices that I made, definitely chopped and changed jobs a lot. Definitely didn't go out as much as my friends did in terms of going on holidays or having new experiences and traveling the world. I think stuff like that. When I was younger, I did probably regret it, but now I'm able to do it way more, say, than some of my friends because I made sacrifices younger.
And I guess because you've got 3 kids and the hubby, you're doing it as a family as opposed to sort of like doing it, you know what I mean, in your 20s when it might have been fun, but it would have been a completely different experience. Going on holidays now with your family is like a different
Mm.
experience. So in all,
It's childcare in another country. It's hard. It's still hard, but me and my husband used to go away without the kids sometimes, so we do get some free time. But yeah, it is different. But I do think that there's definitely a time and a place to enjoy your youth. Do I regret what I done? Probably not, because that just wasn't probably my personality. But I think going out to enjoy yourself and learn about the world, absolutely when you're younger, if you have the capacity to.
well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think enjoyment and spending don't necessarily have to be sort of like.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people do say, okay, oh yeah, I bought these clothes that, I did, spent all this money when they're young. And you're kind of like, yeah, but you didn't, did you really enjoy it or did you just do it because everybody else was doing it, etc.? So I think in a way it's like enjoy experiences don't always have to be expensive. So it's an interesting sort of dynamic there, isn't it, around people view it, etc. So actually that's quite interesting. So actually your friends are the ones that sort of showed you where where the potential places where you could buy water, I'm assuming, so that you said you and your friends who were like in different parts of the country, and you were like, inadvertently, you weren't thinking about it at the time, obviously, but you were kind of like, hold on a minute, Manchester's much cheaper than London in terms of what they're
Yeah.
paying for rent and what they're paying for a
Yeah.
property.
Yeah. That plus data. I think so. When you get into property, you cannot bypass data. When I say data, is things like looking online to see how much prices of houses are that sold, what the actual rental is of the properties on that road, if there's any regeneration going into that area, if there's any new companies be moving there. So alongside obviously having the back of my mind that friends are visited, it was also data. You
Yeah.
have to the numbers speak for themselves. You have to do your due diligence when it comes to anything you put money into. So that alongside the friends that I had visited, that definitely helped.
And that's linked, I guess, to sort of like identifying a great investment opportunity. It's kind of like looking at the data, etc., looking at the numbers, and sort of saying, yeah, this makes sense, even though it might not completely add up on the numbers, but I can see the movement in the area. I can see kind of like, like you say, regeneration and sort of patterns.
You know what? Might have to disagree because I think for me the numbers have to make sense before I make the move. before, if there's regeneration happening or there's stuff like that happening, it's alongside the numbers. Yeah, the numbers have. I think with a property, if you're a property investor, you actually make money when you buy the property, not when you sell it. If you buy it at the right price, you're winning. So the numbers have to stack up before you make the purchase. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you wouldn't go into something and be like, but I'm gonna have to sort of like supplement this in terms of rental for a few months before it starts to make you a
No,
profit.
again, so when I say numbers, long term numbers. If I have to sacrifice a bit now, but I still get it at a good price, that's okay. If I know later on down the line, because I'm not a property investor that deals more in a lot of flipping. I hold on to my properties, and because I'm holding on, I'm always going to make the numbers make sense in the long term.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the sort of portfolio you have now. And you said you've got sort of 30 by the end of this month. By the time this show goes out, you have 30. So do you sort of stick to the same type of properties? Do you sort of stick to like flats, houses, HMOs? What kind of properties do you sort of go for?
So when I first started my property journey, it was the standard buy-to-lets. Very basic. You buy it, you tenant it, you're good to go. And as I got older, I started realizing there's a lot more money in property that I'm not utilizing. That's when we kind of switched our approach. So now we have HMOs, we have service accommodations, we have redevelopments, we have properties that we give to social housing. So it's literally a bit of everything. And right now we're doing a conversion project as well. We have a property that is a very big property and we're converting it into 3 flats. So there's a bit of everything in our portfolio.
Okay. And something like an HMO, it can be quite scary. Do you do the agency role as well? So in terms of finding the tenants or the licensees, I guess, at HMO, but do you do that bit as well, or do you get an agency to do that?
Amazing question. So all of my properties, I manage it myself apart from the HMOs. It's just too much work. That one, I give
So,
that to an agent. Take it if you want. I pay you your commission, I pay you your fee. But that
yeah.
one, I'm not dealing with it. So yeah, I'll buy the property, make sure it's HMO compliant, but always give it to an agent because I can't. I've got 3 HMOs in my portfolio at the moment, and I just can't do it.
Yeah, I think that's where I struggle. I mean, from my perspective, I work in social housing, so sometimes as well, it's kind of like the condition, working with certain landlords, and if you have a landlord and then you have a housing management agency as well, it can be really tricky because I need to speak to the landlord. I can't deal with the agent, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
especially
100%.
yeah, adaptations, blah blah blah, and so it can be tricky. But with an HMO, I'd totally be with you on that one. I'd be like, it's just way too much movement, way too much, in and
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I get that. And tell me a little bit about the serviced accommodation. Is that kind of like Airbnb
So
type of thing?
exactly, Airbnb,
Yeah.
Airbnb. So short-term lets.
And how is that working now? Because obviously there's been quite a lot of noise. I think about Airbnb in the news. Um,
Yeah.
sort of has that sort of affected the
So
industry?
the property that is currently Airbnb, it was a standard buy-to-let first. That it was like that for many years. It's actually in Sheffield, and then we kind of changed our approach and thought we can actually get a lot more money for this because it's in a city centre, not far from the university. There's lots of major things around the area, like football stadiums and stuff like that. So we knew it was a good shout for service accommodation. So we changed it to that, and so far it's doing okay. It's doing fine in terms of the occupancy and the money that we get in. It's better than it was when we were renting it out as a standard tenancy agreement. But we're very aware that laws could change. In London, there's a 90-day rule for Airbnb that could be extended to loads of other parts of the UK. So we're very aware of that, which is why it makes only a very small portion of our portfolio. So if we need to change it back to standard
Can
tenancy,
do.
we can do that.
And I guess it goes back to that point really around the location, 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 because, London to Airbnb, yeah, but like somewhere like Sheffield, where you've got a huge student population, the fact that you're sort of targeting more of the people that are coming in for things like football matches, etc., it makes sense as an, you know what I mean? But it's all about the location, and I think sometimes people, they don't consider that as much as they should in their
Yeah.
data.
100%. The location is so important. There's a lot of factors, but location is paramount. If you get a lot of football into the area, there's demands. You've done half the job already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
even if
much.
you're looking at in London, like Abbey Wood, if you heard the whispers of there's going to be an Elizabeth line coming on, it's going to pass through Abbey Wood. If you were privy to that conversation and those talks that were happening, and you got a property in Abbey Wood, you would be absolutely laughing now. As soon as the Elizabeth line went in, property prices went like that. So location is so important.
It is, it is. But like you said, it's location, but it's also about having your ear to the ground. One of the things that you said was really important is about relationship building. So, I know that when I've bought properties, I've known the estate agents, like they've known me for a good 6 months, 7 months. You know what I mean? It's not just like I go in and I'm like, what you got for me? It's literally, and
Yeah,
like you say, they start
relationship.
knowing you before it's even gone on the market. They're like, okay, I've got something coming on next week. Do you want to get in early? Think about whether or not
Because
you want to.
they know you.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
know
because the thing
you.
about networking,
Yeah, and I think it's harder to do when you're working across the country the way that you do. Do you know what I mean? You've got different properties in different places. But I think, if people sort of maybe focused on one or two locations and really built that network, that relationship, that would make a lot of sense. How
100%.
big
Because
do
there's
you?
a bit of a sorry, no, so there's a bit of a difference. So I've got a lot of properties, different locations to like diversify, but there's also nothing wrong with sticking to one location because I know people that have properties on the same street because they know what the ceiling of that property is going to be. So they don't have to go and redo the data because they already know the data for that area. So it just depends on what your approach is.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to risk appetite. I mean, it's like some people feel like, yeah, I can take a bit of risk with something in another part of the country, whenever. And other people, I need to be like within 20 minutes of everything that so everybody's a little bit different. How big do you anticipate your portfolio growing in the next, let's say, 5 years?
I want to say limitless. And to be honest, I don't have a number, but I know where well, we've got a plan in terms of what we're working on. It when I mentioned the BRR before and recycling your money, that's kind of where our focus is going to be. We're going to continue to recycle the same pot of money and grow and grow and grow the property portfolio, but also do a lot more riskier things like commercial and buying properties that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 flats. We're already starting to with our appetite now with what we're doing with our redevelopment so we can do bigger and better. We can get networking out there and knowing who are the contractors that are great that can do this. What other stuff do we need to know about? Because I think you don't realize there's so much stuff that goes into property. Like you have to excavate the ground to put your electrical cables through. If you want to separate the current meter into different flats, there's a lot of technical things you need to know about councils and planning. So we're learning so much now with our property portfolio that we have right now that we want to go bigger and scale it to commercial.
Yeah, and you talked about the conversion. It's like, turning one property into sort of three flats, etc. I guess also it's about learning around timescales because I think people don't think about how long they might have to sort of carry a mortgage if they're doing it by, they're not doing it cash, how long they'd have to carry a mortgage. And any build I've ever had has told me something will take a certain amount of time, and it's always taken
Oh, they're
double.
lying. Yeah.
Always
Just
taken
the
like
stubborn
double.
it. Yeah.
And so it's like it's the builder's thing. So you just say, okay, I'll just double or triple what you just told me so that I can
Just
actually
add the
be.
buffer all the time. Add the buffer to the cost, add the buffer to the time. It's just how
Yeah.
it works.
Have you ever sort of like made some mistakes or taken some losses
Oh
and thought,
yeah.
okay, I
100%.
talk through that? Because I think that helps people as well, just to be like, you will make mistakes. It's not going to be
You
like,
will make mistakes. Property is not a get rich quick scheme. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So we had a property that was a HMO in Yorkshire that we bought that we wanted to do up, modernize, make it a bit more attractive to command a higher rent. So we got a bathroom contractor in to so basically it was a 5 bed, it had one bath, which is nasty. So we wanted to add another two more bathrooms in, so at least there's a lot more bathrooms for the people that would be in the property. So we paid a contractor to do the works and the bathrooms in, and they have the gift of the gab. They're just like, yeah, don't worry, we'll get it done in 2 weeks. And we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. And it's like, okay, fine. And because I'm not in the area, it's a lot of trust in what you say. So they put the bathrooms in. We now go to test it. We flush the toilet. The water's like running down the side of the house. We flush, we turn on the tap. It's overflowing. It's not going down the waste pipe. So they absolutely did us dirty. They did not do the job properly. The bathroom was not to a good standard, and it burnt us because we lost a lot of money and time. The more time we're having to rectify their issues, the more time it's not being tenanted, the more time we're not getting rent on that. So we definitely have been burnt with some rogue contractors, um, even some property managers when it comes to HMO saying, oh, the property is absolutely fine. As soon as you get a tenant in there, that's broken, this is not working, that's not working. And it's like you didn't do your job beforehand to check what the last tenant didn't do or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that we have learned in the hard way in property.
And I guess that goes back, it goes to the question of kind of like, if someone doesn't have a lot of money, what's the best way for them to sort of invest in property or start the journey? Because they kind of they can't carry that, they can't carry an HMO with vacancies for that, with voids.
And
They
this
just
is why I
can't.
say risk appetite. If you have the money and the time and the headspace to be able to have something that can go wrong, because with a HMO or BRR, you're kind of counting on contractors, you're counting on them doing a job right, you're counting on things be done to a certain time scale. It's different from a buy to let. If you just buy a buy to let that's already done, all you got to do is get a tenant in there and you're getting paid rent. So your risk appetite has to match your pockets. So yeah, it's just really important where you place yourself on that journey.
So if someone came to you and they sort of said, look, I've only got 30K, that's all I've got. What should I do? Where should I start? What I mean? They've got a job, so they could subsidize something for a little bit in terms of, what I mean? They've got an income, but they've only got 30K.
And there's a lot of questions I need to ask them. What is your overall objective? Are you looking for rental income or are you looking for capital appreciation? I think that's really important. If you're looking for a property to go up in value over time, there's certain locations I suggest to you. If you just want money to be coming in monthly, you don't really care about the property going up in value, then I'll suggest another location. And again, risk appetite always goes back to that. Are you happy to have risks with your money? Doing something that is a bit not standard to try and get a bit more cash flow quicker? Or do you just want the money to just work for you over time? Like there's so many things that are dependent, and location, very, very important. So it really just depends on what the person's objective is, and that will determine how I suggest and advise them. And there's also other things like I'm sure you've probably heard of it, rent to rent and rent to service accommodation and deal sourcing. A lot of people that don't have big funds, they kind of start their property journey doing that. So they'll get a landlord's property and rent it out and then pay the landlord a certain amount, but have that contract for and have that contract for either 3 or 5 years. So that's another way to dip your foot into property. But I always say I'm not averse to rent to rent or rent to service accommodation, but as long as that's not your long-term aim, because with that you never have ownership. So it's important to understand, let that be the avenue to generate wealth, to build up your money, but don't let that be the full stop. And then with deal sourcing, if you're very good with your gift of the gab and you know how to negotiate, you can present to an investor a property that you have and get paid the middle fee for introducing that investor to the property. So those are other ways to get into property. But if you want to get your foot on the ladder, unfortunately, you have to save. You have to save, or you have to be able to get people to give you money in terms of investors to start your journey. But you have to have money. There's no way you can get into property with nothing. I think there's so many people online and gurus that say that you can do that, and it's just not what I've experienced.
I mean, I think I get you on in terms of like the rent to rent and all that. That's all well and good in terms of cash flow, but like you say, you can't then leverage, to me, in terms of borrowing to be able to do something else in the
Yeah.
future.
If the owner decides to take it off you tomorrow,
Yeah,
your cash
exactly.
flow is finished.
Or they decide to put their part of the rent up, and the market can't actually stretch to sort of still give you enough of the profit. So it's kind of like, yeah, let's say you're making 200-300 or whatever, and then they're like, yeah, but I'm putting it up by 250, and you're like, well, I'd only be getting 50 quid. You know what I mean? Unless I put
Yeah,
it up.
yeah.
Yeah.
With those contracts, they tend to have like a 3 or 5 year, and it's fixed. The amount they're going to get doesn't change in that term.
Oh,
So
that's
it
good.
just depends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. And then going back to sort of like, your first one, was it Help to Buy, or did you use one of those schemes?
Just
You
as,
said
not
five.
just as so there's even now still 5% mortgage available. There's no scheme. It's just a 5% deposit, 95% loan to value mortgage. So yeah, that's what I did. There was no scheme,
Well, are
but it
people
was a
still
high interest rate.
Yeah, I can imagine. Are people still using like Help to Buy kind of government schemes to sort of get onto the
Yeah,
ladder? Yeah, and that
yeah,
works well.
definitely. And it does work well. I think with people who are first time buyers, they have stamp duty relief. They get a reduced amount for stamp duty, and it's also something called a lifetime ISA, where the government says if you put up to a certain amount in per year, sorry, for your allowance, they'll give you 25%. So you can get £1,000 cash free if you save the maximum, which is £4,000. So there's government incentives and stuff I think people need to take advantage of if they're definitely first time buyers.
Mm. And then in terms of your first thing, you just saved. You just kind of like
Just save, literally put my head down and say,
no bank of mum and dad.
absolutely not. I wish, but no, there wasn't, unfortunately.
And when you talk about sort of like your parents, you did council, you grew up in sort of like that council environment, etc. So there wasn't ownership. But I'm assuming then you sort of saw the sort of first wave of like right to buys and stuff. So you started to see people within those areas starting to own for the first time, sort of like
Well,
early 90s.
no. In terms of people that were actually in my community around me, I was the first person that I knew of to buy a house. I just always knew I wanted to get a house. But in terms of my generation, there was no one there. So when I started going to college and visiting my college friends' houses, and I see that their parents are also African and they own their property, I was just like, is that possible? I didn't fathom that people can live in properties that weren't council houses. I thought that's what everyone had. I didn't know that you could actually have your own. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. But when I done it, the first one out of any of my friends for years to have a property, but I just knew I wanted to have one. And that's kind of why I've started doing my mentorship and consultation and inspiring and educating people, because when I when I started doing it and people ask me questions and I give them advice, they hadn't heard of it before. They hadn't seen anyone that looked like them buy. So that's kind of why I really want to ensure that people know it's attainable. If I can do it, then they can definitely do it too.
Yeah. And I think that's it. So property by Jules, it's like it really helps first time buyers and investors. Is that sort of like first time investors? Is it aimed
And
at?
on any part of your journey, because you can have a property portfolio of 5, 6 properties, but they're all buy to let. So you want to kind of do something a bit more advanced, but you need some hand holding or mentorship. I've been there, I've done that, I've worn many, many hats. So I can help them in terms of how to get there.
And I think the other thing that you have maybe that I think is it doesn't come out so much is that it's actually the little black book, because it's about the connections. It's about the sort of like you say the brokers. You mentioned it very, very lightly, but like it's the brokers and it's the kind of solicitors. That's the bit that I've always struggled with. Whenever I've had to do it. I mean, I've been lucky. I've had good brokers at different points in my career, in my journey. But then there's been other times when I'm just like,
You're
I don't
chasing
understand.
them. It's like you're
Yeah,
begging them to reply to an inquiry. And it's just like, I'm paying
exactly.
you.
What are the, is it conveyances? So it's like the
So
solicitor
yeah,
was fine, and it's moved over to the conveyancing side, and I'm just like, hey, what's happening? I've not had any requests.
the solicitors
What's
are
going
there
on?
to, when they say solicitors, they're there to get the money to get it started. And once the actual process starts, it's like you're drawing blood from a stone from some of them. They just won't reply. That's why in terms of like getting recommendations for good solicitors, that as well, it just saves so much headache and time. I think it's really important for people who are getting this property to have a good experience of how it works.
And the other group that's I think really important, especially if you've got portfolio, is the accountants. So some accountants, they do like solopreneurs, etc. But when it comes to sort of like property, it is a little bit more
They're
not
more
technical.
technical.
Yeah, yeah, but it's like it's a little bit more fiddly because they've really got to make sure it's linked to the right thing, and you know what I mean. And I think yeah, getting the right accountant is just like a godsend.
It is just, you don't want to get a penalty every single year it comes around because they don't know what they're doing or submit your returns late.
Yeah.
So it's important.
So in terms of like, so somebody comes and they've not thought about it at all, and they're kind of like, I've got a bit of extra money. Um, I'm kind of in the job transition, but I just want to, have something a little bit. a passive income. So I want rental income, from property. Sort of what are the practical steps that they can take to get there?
Practical steps, decide on what they're looking for. So similar to your question before, do you want capital appreciation or do you want rental? If rental is what you're looking for, let's get to the right areas that will give you that rental. And I think they also need to think about when they get the property, are they in a state in terms of, are they time rich to manage it themselves? Because if there's when you're a landlord, there's now maintenance issues, there's repairs you've got to deal with. If you're not in a position to do that, you need to have a property manager, which I also do that too, to manage it for you, to make sure you are compliant. Because when you're a landlord, there's certain things you need to make sure you have, like the gas safety certificate, the electrical certificate, the EPC, there's certain things that you need to have that's compliant. So are you in a position to do that? Do you want to
Do you
let
want
someone
to?
else do that for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just depends on a lot of different things.
I've heard that they might be getting rid of EPCs.
No, so by 2030, all properties have to have at least a C rating. So there's time, but landlords need to make sure their properties are, yeah, they're doing their bits now to make sure they can, when it gets to 2030, that they've got a C rating.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess there is that thing about, do you want to be a landlord or do you want to also be the property manager? To me, because it's a different role. So at the moment, you're doing all of it, are you? And is that your day job? So it's your full-time job as well as the
Full time, yeah,
mentoring?
property full time. Yeah, I do property full time. I don't have another 9 to 5.
Okay. And what point did you say, okay, I'm going to do property full-time and leave the 9 to 5, as it were?
You know what? I've been doing it for a long time, obviously alongside another job. But when I had my last son, he's 21 months now. I was like, I'm not going back to work. I'm not going back. Once maternity leave ends, I'm going to do this properly. I think that's when I started my doing properly my Instagram page and being more consistent with posting, be more consistent with helping people and educating people in the side. And I think that's when I've realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think so. Like you say, life dictates kind of work, and you're kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense for me to be trying to do all of that. Plus, I think if you're doing the property management, I've got a friend who does that. It takes up so much of somebody's time.
Oh, it really does. It does. You have to be time rich to be in property if you want to do the full works.
I think so as well. I think you can't just kind of do it. And I think that's the misconception that you can have it as a bit of a side hustle, which maybe you can with like one, maybe two. But if you're looking
Yeah,
at
but
something, yeah,
property is not passive. It's not passive. You can say
not,
that word so much, and it's like there's work to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of getting into the industry as well, because I think property, although it's not so much now, but maybe 10 years ago, is seen as kind of quite male dominated. Have you ever kind of had any sort of self-doubt, etc., around that?
All the time, yeah, because like you said, it's very male dominated. There's not a lot of women and women who look like us in property. So even when I go to meetings with like contractors who are meeting for the first time, and it's me and my husband, they're like looking at my husband for the responses when it's like I'm the one directing the conversation. Can we look guys, please? So yeah, definitely. Sometimes you do get overlooked, but you just have to assert your confidence and not be rude, but just understand that obviously me and my husband, we are a partnership anyway. So whatever he says goes with me. But at the same time, listen when I'm talking, please.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like, although you're a partnership, it's like you say, this is you that's leading this bit of the partnership. So for them to be talking at him, I mean, it's the same, I guess, with cars and whatever. But it's like, come on, now,
Really.
have we not moved
Yeah.
from?
I'm here, right in front of you. Yeah.
It happened to me. I have a like my property friend. We used to work together. I was his boss. We'd go to meetings. He's white male, and everybody just assumed I'm the secretary. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute,
Yeah.
you had the emails from
Mm,
me. The meeting was set up with me.
mm.
You know what I mean? So it's very
It's
clear.
deceitful. Yeah. And I think that's why representation, it really does matter. The more you put yourself out there and you're visible, then they understand that things are changing. Yeah, and I'm not saying we need to be more mannish or less emotional and not be women, but we can be women but still be strong in our fields.
I think so. And I think also, although it's property construction are two I know they go hand in hand, but they are different. And yet the sort of like misogyny that we get is very much how we see the construction field. So I'm surprised that still exists, because you're kind of like, have we not moved on?
Yeah. Yes,
Apparently.
very big. Because even I'm also RICS project management qualified, RICS construction project management qualified. Because a part of property is, if you're doing up a property, you want to know how to manage it properly. So I've also done that part. So when you're doing that part as well, it's kind of a similar thing. And that's why I deal with contractors quite a lot, because I have to speak to them for the refurb part. And it's still a bit like, I am the person you should be speaking to. Just please deal with me properly. But yeah.
And in terms of managing sourcing tenants, how easy or how difficult is that? Because I mean, we hear that it's really, really difficult at the moment. But you know, what's
It
your
can
as
be
a
very difficult. It can be difficult at times. It depends again on the location. So I had a client who wanted me to source a property in Yorkshire for them, but specifically a BRRR one. So one that was run down, that they can buy with cash. Again, me as a project manager, do it up for them, like could totally do the refurb for them and then refinance it too. So that one wasn't that tricky. I managed to view 6 properties in one day. Then I had another client that wanted me to go to Milton Keynes, and that one, it was a bit less. I think I viewed 4 in a day, because that's literally all I could get. There wasn't a huge pool. And now I've got another client who has a property in London that they want to rent out. So it's a bit different. It's not the buying, it's now the rental side, but it's still an element of sourcing, because you are still managing it for that client, trying to get tenants into that property. That one, it dribs and drabs. Dribs and drabs. There's not much there. So it depends on the location, what the client wants. There's a client that wants a property in Nottingham that I'm going to deal with very, very soon. Nottingham, not that much properties. Derbyshire, which is not too far from there, a lot more. So it just depends on the location. And again, what the clients look for. Have they got a really tight budget, or are they able to flex a bit? So the client's requirements is what kind of drives everything.
yeah. But I suppose in terms of like finding people, so then they've got the properties, you found the properties, but then finding the tenants for the
The
properties.
contact list. Oh, that
Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah.
Does
There's
that?
the there's the demand is peaks and troughs sometimes. This 6, 7 months ago, demand was really, really high. Now it's reduced a lot. Maybe it's because it's coming up to the budget in April's and things changing over. People aren't changing. People aren't moving as much. But I've got another property in Sheffield that I'm actually struggling to tenant, which is very, very strange, because I'm used to getting tenants in straight away. But right now, the demand is so low. So peaks and troughs in properties.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think what happened really is that obviously they called the election last July, and then you had the budget in October, and I think people were hoping that the budget would give a little bit more certainty. But then, you've got things like national insurances going up, so nobody really knows what's happening with jobs. And then you've got another budget coming in June, so kind of like it won't even be the typical April where everything will, everyone's budgets will come through. Everyone's going to wait till this June, Rachel Reeves, budget announcement, and we still don't know. Do you see what I mean? So I think there's been
Exactly. And even the renters reform as well, when that one came out, I was just like, what is going on here? A lot of changes for landlords and tenants and different rights. And that's why people are now trying to downsize their portfolio, because there's uncertainty in what the future holds for their properties. And do they even have claim to their properties if they got a tenant in there? So the laws, when you're in property, if people think it's just about property, you have to actually have your eyes open for the actual macros as well in the world, the laws, the politics, the government, what this stuff affects your property.
And I think it goes back to sort of talking about, people in property for the long term or the short. If it is the long term, then it's like you can ride these waves, because, like, every 10 years. But a lot of people can't. It's like, it's almost like check to check, rent check to rent check. They haven't got the capacity to be able to ride a bit of a storm, not have a tenant for 3 months, etc. Like, oh, I'm going to sell it because it's not, can't find it.
And I understand that as well, but that's the thing. When you own property, I always make sure the risk appetite. What is your risk appetite? I'm going to keep saying that. And can you, like you said, manage if there's void periods? Can you manage if your interest rate goes up after the fixed period ends? You have to really think about stuff outside the here and now when you're in property, because there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of predictions out there, and so people have kind of like probably said, "Oh, I'm just not going to do anything until I'm really sure." But I don't know that we'll get certainty for another year or so. So it's like, sit on it, waiting for certainty because we just don't know. And in terms of the tenant reform bill, it's like it came through, and they were like, "Yeah, there are all these changes that are really good for tenants and leaseholders, lessees," but when are they coming in? Like nobody's really
So
sure. It's kind of like,
this is
have it
it.
started?
This is it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a really big one. And then we did touch on it a little bit in terms of your brand, your sort of I know you're on LinkedIn and you're on Instagram. Tell me a little bit around sort of like social media, and has it helped, or how are you driving sort of making sure that people are aware of you and what you have to offer?
Mm. So unfortunately, in this day and age now, if you don't have a social media presence, you're not real. You have to have a social media presence to be visible, to be active. A lot of my clients and people who reach out to me, they're from social media. It's not from my website, it's from Instagram, it's from TikTok, stuff like that, not even LinkedIn, which is supposed to be the professional part of it. So I think you have to have a social media presence, and that helps a lot. It shows people daily what you are doing. You say you're in property, let me see your properties then. You say you're in property, let me see who you've mentored. You say you're in property, what are you doing today? Like, people need to see, unfortunately, the daily lives of someone who's actually doing it, to be able to trust you enough. Because people are watching, whether you believe it or not, people watch you for a long time before they reach out to you. So you have to be consistent with your posting, consistent with your presence, consistent with your visibility if you want to really make it in this day and age.
And who is your typical client? Are you finding it's kind of like predominantly women, 50-50 age range?
Before it was a lot of women, and now there's quite a few men who are reaching out. I do consultation calls every week, and the number of men is creeping up a lot more. The women who approach me, there's mix as well, not just black and mixed, white people as well do approach me, and we have a lot of calls, and we help them figure out where they want to go. Because like I said, a lot of people, they're just watching to see if they can gain the trust before they reach out. So there's a majority is women, but I think 25% now is men, which I was surprised about, because a lot of men tend to go to men for property advice, but I'm getting a lot more men reaching out.
And I think that's good because, like you say, like it helps to sort of like have the experience and be able to sort of like validate what you've been doing for the last 10 years. So maybe that's what
100%.
that's probably what men are leaning towards. But also, I do feel like there's a strength in being a woman in the field because you do think about things differently. Like you may think about things in terms of locations and schools and hospitals, etc. Like guys can think about too. Don't get me wrong, but it's like it's almost instinctive when you've got 3 kids yourself. You're
100%.
like,
With men is very logical, and that makes complete sense because property is logical. But like you said, if you want to buy a house that, for example, has steep steps going up it, a woman wouldn't buy because they're thinking of a buggy that they've got to drag up it. They're thinking of shopping that they've got to carry up it. And when you buy property, you've got to also think of, can I sell it easily? So women will naturally think of that stuff as well. So you're absolutely right.
yeah. So it's an interesting one, I think, in terms of, the audience shifting as time has gone by, and like maybe men watch a little bit longer before they sort of think, yeah, okay, she's the right person for me to sort of like to help me, support me through my journey. So how much time do you actually spend out on the road?
Varies all the time. So I was in London this week for maybe about 4 hours collectively this week. The week before that, I was in Milton Keynes, which was 2.5 hour drive. No, 2 hour drive there, 2 hour drive back, and then like 2 hours in the actual in Milton Keynes doing my viewings. 2 weeks before that, I was in Hull, and that was a 4 hour drive there, 3 hours in Hull, and 4 hours back. So I was out of the house for 12 hours. It just every week is different depending on the client that I'm working with. I'm going to be in Nottingham, I think 2 weeks now. So That's a 2.5 hour drive there from where I am now. So every week is different. And then I dedicate 2 hours a week to do mentorship and consultation calls too.
Uh, is there anywhere in the UK that you're like, we're all sleeping on and we should be looking a little bit closer at, like regions or like cities that you're like, hey, why aren't you all in Grimsby?
You know what? Milton Keynes is a good shout because Milton Keynes recently been given, I think is it city status, city or town, one of the two, city or town status. And because it's not too far from London and it's very fairly new, everything just looks nice. When I went there, I was like, everything is just new. There's so many developments there, from the Barrett Homes to the Taylor Wimpey's to these people. And one of the tricks I always say is that if you can see developers are running to an area, they've obviously done their due diligence of the time and the research. If they're going there, there's a reason. Go there too. So that's why I think Milton Keynes, I think, is a definitely good shout. Yorkshire is a very good shout in terms of like the Hull and the Doncaster area. I think those are going to do really well.
It's interesting because I used to work for Milton Keynes Council, so I know it really well. And yeah, one of the key things is that it's only about 55 years old as a city.
It's so
new
yeah.
cities. And Labour are now
No,
talking about, creating more new cities, like Stephen first and then Milton Keynes, so those kind of areas. Nothing is particularly old. Yes, it can feel a little bit samey, but it's a commuter town, so you get that real advantage of people still being able to work in London. But with hybrid working, Milton Keynes is definitely a good shout. So I hear that. But yeah, no, I mean, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
so they can find me on Instagram and TikTok, YouTube as well, and my website. So the name is Property by Jules, all one word, and Jules is JEWELS. And my website is www.propertybyjules.com.
Oh, no, okay. And you did say that you're African by descent, didn't you? Was it West?
Nigerian, yes.
Oh, okay. But also is Ghanaian?
So my husband is Ghanaian, I'm Nigerian, so we're a blended family.
And for the rest of us, it's like it's all West.
Yeah, no.
But no, that's been really useful. So thank you very much for your time today. And I think if
Thank you
people
for having me.